One of the most confusing topics in real estate today is buyer's agency or buyer's representation. What is it? Why is it necessary? How does it work? And how does it impact agent compensation? It seems like a big topic, but once you get past some history, it is really very straightforward. Hey there, I'm Susan Cassidy with Love Your Move at Coldwell Banker. And with over 20 years of real estate experience right here in Connecticut, I'm here to educate you on all things real estate. So let's jump into this topic together. Buyer agency can seem confusing, but it doesn't have to be. It exists to protect both consumers and agents in the real estate transaction. So as promised, here's a bit of history. Prior to 1997, buyers in Connecticut were pretty much told caveat emptor, buyer beware. When a seller listed their home for sale, the listing agreement was with the brokerage, not the agent. Therefore, all agents in that brokerage represented the seller and owed them care and loyalty. That's actually still true today. But back then, there was a practice called sub-agency. So even agents and brokers from other brokerages ultimately represented the seller in the transaction. Buyers were left without professional guidance or advocacy. Kind of crazy considering how big a deal it is to buy a house, both financially and emotionally. Then the state of Connecticut began changing the laws around real estate practices, not just buyer agency. It enacted a host of regulations that all fall under agency and licensing laws. A buyer agency agreement creates the professional relationship between a home buyer and a real estate agent. In this relationship, the agent owes the buyer several fiduciary duties, just like a listing agent does for a seller. In essence, a buyer agency agreement puts a buyer on even ground with the seller. So what exactly are these fiduciary duties? Loyalty. Your needs come first, even above those of the agent themselves. Then confidentiality. That's pretty obvious, but it's important because in order to truly help you, your agent needs to understand your financials, your motivations, even your desires. Trusting that that information will not be shared is vitally important. Disclosure means informing you of anything the agent knows that may influence your decisions regarding properties, offers, and negotiations. Obedience means they must follow any lawful instruction given to them by a client. Agents will give you the benefit of their professional experience, but ultimately, the client is driving the bus. Accounting simply means that we must give our clients an accurate accounting of all communications, money, etc. Full transparency. And finally, reasonable care requires the agent to act with the level of care, skill, and diligence that a reasonable and competent agent would use in similar circumstances. In Connecticut, it's state law that a buyer agency agreement be signed before crossing the threshold of any listing held by another brokerage. It's only when showing a listing held by their own brokerage that an agent can show a property without this agreement in place. However, in that case, the buyer must sign a disclosure stating that the agent has explained that they represent the seller and not the buyer. Guys, this has been state law since 1997. So generally speaking, what does a buyer agent provide? Advocacy. Your buyer's agent is your advocate looking out for your best interests throughout the buying process. Professional guidance. They provide expertise and knowledge about the market, property values, and community information, which can be invaluable when making decisions. Negotiation skills. The agent has the skills and experience to negotiate on your behalf to secure the best possible price and terms for your new home. Confidentiality. Any personal or financial information you share with your buyer's agent is kept confidential and cannot be disclosed without your permission. Resourcefulness. Buyers agents have access to a wide array of resources such as listings that may not be publicly available, and they can tap into their professional network to help you find and secure the right property for you. Now, this is not a list of every task an agent will do for you. That could be another whole video, but I think it gives you the idea. So now, with buyer agency in place, we have an agent with a fiduciary responsibility to the seller and another agent with a fiduciary responsibility to the buyer. Both parties have dedicated representation. But Connecticut state law allows for another form of representation: dual agency, when one agent represents both buyer and seller. When it arises, both parties have the right to consent or not to dual agency. If either party wants their own designated agent, they have that right. But understand this: if they go forward with dual agency, the agent essentially becomes Switzerland. They cannot violate their fiduciary responsibility to either party, so they can no longer offer an advice to either one. I mean, honestly, how do you counsel a buyer on what to offer when you know what the seller's bottom line is? Or if you know what other offers have been made? How do you counsel a seller on a counteroffer when you have discussed the buyer's financials and motivations? You just can't. Once you know something, you cannot unring that bell. So the only way to handle it is to remain completely neutral. Switzerland. Many buyers think that if they work with the listing agent, they will get an inside track or a better deal on that listing. The truth, though, is that if the listing agent has to remain neutral, there is no inside track. Legally, they cannot give their buyer any information they would not give to any other buyer. Get it? So that covers what buyer agency is, why it is necessary, and how it works. So how does it impact agent compensation? This explanation would not be complete if I did not address buyer agency from the standpoint of the agent. In addition to establishing a fiduciary relationship between buyer and agent, it is also a contract hiring the brokerage and establishing appropriate payment. The buyer agency agreement is a two-way commitment. The agent promises to work in the buyer's best interest and provide them with the benefit of their skill and professionalism, and the buyer commits to working solely with the agent they've chosen within clearly defined parameters. Now, these parameters are a start date and an expiration date and a clearly stated geographic area. For example, it could be a 12-month agreement or a 24-hour agreement, or anything in between. It could cover the whole state, a county, a selection of towns, or even a single specific address, whatever you mutually agree on. It also stipulates the commission percentage that the buyer's agency should expect to be paid. Now, luckily, since most sellers recognize that the strongest buyers are working with a buyer's agent and have a buyer's agency agreement, they will likely make an offer of compensation to the buyer's agency directly out of the proceeds of the sale of the home. Now, I need to be clear here that all of these parameters, commission, time frame, and geography, are all negotiable. This is also state law. There is no industry standard or typical. It is negotiated between agent and client. So it's important at this point to say this. This is how we make our living. This is how we pay our bills and feed our families. A real estate sales associate or broker has no salary. There is no hourly wage, paid vacation, or benefits. Most people don't understand what it means to be an independent contractor. For us, it's 100% commission. We do not get paid until we represent a buyer or a seller and there's a closing. Now, that is what we signed up for, and we aren't complaining, but it does need to be understood. This means we can work diligently for months and never get paid if a buyer changes their mind, buys in another area, or simply doesn't find what they're looking for. When an agent begins working for a buyer, they do all of the things and more that I mentioned earlier. It is time-intensive, important work. So as I said in the beginning, buyer agency is really pretty straightforward. It's a commitment that protects both the consumer and the agent as they work together in good faith toward the common goal of finding and securing a home for the buyer. And speaking for myself at least, we care deeply for the success of our clients. We work hard. So that's it. I hope you found this helpful. I'm Susan Cassidy, and my goal is to help you truly love your move. If you are still confused or want more information, please reach out by scanning the QR code at the end of the video. I am always happy to take the time to answer your questions. Have a great day.